Hello friends, so today's video is going to be a list of some cover buys. I wouldn't say I purchased these books solely because of the covers, because I always, even when a cover intrigues me, look at the synopsis. But I would say that these particular books, the covers did their job in catching my attention. I was perhaps a little more inclined to look at the synopsis because of these covers. I did do a part 1 to this, so I'll have that link down below if you'd like to see more after this one. And then just like with part 1, if I can find the cover artists or cover designers, I'll have them linked for each of the books that I talk about. Jumping into it though, the first one that I'm going to talk about would be the entirety of the Winnowing Flame trilogy by Jen Williams. I am technically holding up the second book in this trilogy. A friend is borrowing the first one. But either way, all three of the covers of these books I think are absolutely gorgeous. And I remember quite vividly how I came upon these books. So if you don't know, this is one of my favorite trilogies of all time. It is not very hyped. I feel like hardly anybody know. Well, more people know about it now, but at the time, I feel like hardly anybody had ever heard of this series except for maybe Patrick, who is amazing. If you've never watched Patrick's videos, he always reads everything. He reads all the popular fantasy and then also things that I'm always like, what's that? I've never heard of that. So Patrick's great. Definitely check him out. But either way, I had heard no one else talk about this series. And I was, I think, looking on a list of underrated fantasy books, something like that. It was, I think, a blog post or something that someone had. And I was going to do a come online book shopping with me video. I wanted to talk about the website bookshop.org, which gets books from local bookstores, and I'll have them linked also because I still think that they're awesome. But either way, I wanted to do a video where I gave you the option to kind of help me choose. And so I think on Instagram I had asked, like, which one? This one or this one? This one or this one? And Ninth Reign was on there. And I think that I will admit, I don't recall whether or not you all voted for it or for the other book that I had as a you choose, but I got it anyway, regardless. And I'm so glad I did because it's one of my favorite trilogies now. And the covers. So the covers really, I was like, man, even if they don't vote for them, I'm getting that because those covers, they're so cool. And I only bought the first one initially and I was so hopeful. It's one of those series, the covers are so cool that I'm like, I hope I like this trilogy because those covers are awesome. And there's just, my heart will always be drawn to mythological creatures on fantasy covers. I always like a sketched look, which I think that these have. I usually will say that I like white books with pops of color. These are very different in that they have color combinations I wouldn't have thought of myself. I mean, when you see all of them together, they're not colors that you would, I personally don't think I would have typically had these colors go together. And not just from book to book, but within each book, there's a couple of different colors, and they're interesting. The first one's a grayish purple blue with a darker blue with a little bit of red. And the second one is this teal, a darker teal, greenish, and then orange. And I can happily say this is one of those times where the cover art, I think, does pull from things that are going on in the books. The titles themselves definitely tied to the books. And then also the covers got my attention, and then I ended up loving the book. So everything came together perfectly. The cover did its job, and it found a lover of this series in me. If you've not heard me talk about this series before, you must be new because I've talked about it a lot this year. But in case you haven't, I'll have my trilogy review linked down below, as well as a chat I got to do with a couple of other booktubers. This is a great series. Everybody should check it out. Next up, we have a newer release from this year. So usually when I'm looking through books for anticipated releases videos, I obviously have books I'm already excited about, but also I'm looking at what's coming up and what sounds interesting to me. And one of the things that often catches my attention when you're looking through what's going to be coming out for this next season are the covers. And that's very true of Mask of Mirrors. This is one where, as I was looking through books that were going to be coming out in 2021, I saw this one. I'm like, what is that? What is that? And then I got really excited because it sounded really cool. You follow a con artist, and then there's a vigilante masked man character, and then you also have this crime lord character. And I'm like, okay, that sounds awesome. A city setting. I feel like we don't get those as often in fantasy. I was very intrigued, picked it up. It is a very complex world, lots of fantastical names, a very complex magic system. But I think the cover is not only perfectly suited to the book itself and the setting, and there's so many intricacies within the cover, and I feel like there are within the story as well, But it was another success where I saw this and I'm like, that sounds amazing. I really hope it's good. And then I thought it was. Book 2 is out now. I haven't had the chance to pick it up, but just because it's here, I figured I would show it to you. You don't need to see my receipt. So here's book 2. I'll have them together so you can see what they look like. They're not exactly the same, although they have obviously a very similar look, but the mask itself is different. The person's face on the cover, we're a little bit closer to it. I will admit, I typically do not like faces right up in your face in the cover of books, but for these ones, I think they work because it's more so about these extravagant masks, and the face just happens to be underneath, but the face is still, it's interesting. I'm gonna get to something here in a second to perfectly illustrate what I'm talking about here, but I just in general don't usually like a real person's face, real up close and personal. I'm very curious for you, at the very least, even if you don't love the style, does this catch your attention? If you saw this on the shelf, would you want to read the synopsis? Next up, we have Iron Fae. So the reprint of these covers are the ones that got my attention. The original covers are exactly what I was just describing, where it's a person's face really close, and I did not like those covers. And I was interested in picking up something else by this author after reading the Shadow of the Fox series by them, which I quite enjoyed. And I would see the older series or the older covers for this series at my local bookstores, and the spines I thought are great. The spines are colorful, I liked the font, and I was always like, what's this? And it happened multiple times where I would pull it off the shelf, I'm like, oh, it's this, and then I'd put it back because I figured if I'm gonna read this one, I might have to read it digitally, because I really, really did not like the old covers. But then the reprints came out, and then there were book boxes doing special editions, and I was like, okay, I'm not going to buy the special edition box before I've read this story. I want to read the first book, and if I like it, then maybe I can buy the special edition version. So I read through the first one, and I didn't care for it. I think it's one of those, it's definitely for a younger audience, but it's also slightly older young adult, and sometimes older young adult ends up being really good, like the Seven Realms Quartet I really, really enjoy. But this particular one just fell into some tropes that at this point I'm not all that interested in. So it didn't work for me, but the reprints I still think are absolutely beautiful. I just think they're really cool. I think that the font choice is cool. I like the colors from book to book, but I like that the style matches from book to book. So I'm a little bummed that it didn't end up working out for me, because I would love to just look at the beautiful artistry that are these covers. Next up, we have Malice by Gwynn. This is probably one of those covers that I know is generic when it comes to fantasy books, but I still really like them. I like all the covers for this series, and I'm sad. I read Malice earlier this year, and I didn't hate it by any means. But there was just some other reasons why it didn't end up being an ultimate favorite. I had read the first one and I was intrigued and picked up the second one, and then decided to put the series down. But either way, I enjoyed Gwynn's writing, and I enjoy these covers. And I'm still so excited to check out more of this author's works. But either way, these covers, because that's what we're focusing on here, they're just, I like the white, I like the big giant weapon on the cover. I like the font. I don't know what it is about this font, but it's so cool. That's not a very great way to describe it. Just, it's cool. I thought it was cool. It was neat. Last book on this list is one that I have not read because it's a pre-order. But when I saw these covers, so I have Brenda to thank from Bookstagram. Great account to follow if you like fantasy, so I'll have their account linked. But they shared these covers, and I was like, what is that? And then I looked into it, and I was like, okay, that sounds good. But also these covers, so these are not what I would traditionally think that I love, but as soon as I saw them, I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna probably pre-order that. I mean, the synopsis can just basically be like, it's a fantasy story, and I'd be like, that's enough for me. Just because these covers are beautiful. Now, they're very vibrant and they're different, but here you go. Are these not so stunning? The artist who did these, oh my goodness. And it makes me happy because the cover artist is actually linked, which is always nice. What's interesting about this one is both of the books in this duology are coming out in 2022, or at least they're projected to at this time. And I'm really excited because I think publishing is starting to embrace a little more often having books within the same series come out back to back or a lot closer together. Now, I don't know if I want that to become the norm. I think that's a lot of pressure on authors. But if an author already has a completed story, I like that they're not making us wait if we like the first one. So I'm really excited that we get to see both the first and the second. You get to see how they look together. I really like the detail in the text. So if you look closely, while the text itself is very basic and black with somewhat soft edges, if you look, there's color around the edges and it's a different color from word to word. So I like that they're tying in the colors into the text. And I do like that we have this juxtaposition of this really kind of simplistic style of font, but this really vibrant, colorful cover, which to me almost looks like watercolor, but more vibrant. In the first video I did, I kind of was going over various different types that tend to attract my attention for covers, whereas these were a mix of different ones, often ones that I wouldn't typically say fit my usual, but that still did their job in grabbing my attention. So I'm very curious, which of these was your favorite? Did you actually find you didn't care for certain ones of these? Did you find if you had seen them, you would have actually looked the other way and not cared to read the synopsis? What are the things that you like in covers? There's so many beautiful covers out there. This video isn't meant to be talking about the most beautiful covers, but the ones that the synopsis isn't necessarily the thing that grabbed my attention. It was these covers, and I would say I more so lean toward checking these out because of the covers rather than the descriptions that I've been hearing from other people or reviews and things like that. If in the future you'd like me to do an updated favorite covers of all time video, I'd be happy to do so. But anyway, thanks so much for watching. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you all later. Bye.